Welcome back to the Back in Time podcast. I am your host, Kyle Autry, joined as always by my two co-hosts, JD, Jeff. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing pretty well.
Why do you get to go by your full name?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, why
More
don't you get a
important,
silly name? Why can't we call you like crack ass Kyle? I mean,
You know,
I'm
I
just
actually,
saying.
right?
I mean, I introduce myself, with my full name when I talk to people, but not here on the podcast. Like I said, I want to try to keep some anonymity on here.
Okay,
Kyle has he just
interesting.
doesn't give a damn. He just does not give a damn. I don't know how you do
Yeah.
it, man.
I sure don't.
Uh, well, speaking of giving a damn, first off, welcome back, Justin. Or
Yeah,
GD.
you were
Oops,
missed.
spoiled. uh,
Oops, I got a real name.
yeah,
Thank you guys.
we
Yeah, I missed out on last episode. I have not listened to it and I never will, but I'm glad you guys did it.
that's good.
Perfect, perfect. Like to hear it. Hey, I'm interested in hearing about your trip.
Do
Except
you
I'm
right
not.
now or just in
No,
general? Oh, that's
no,
what I
no.
figured. I figured you don't crack ass Kyle don't give a shit about shit.
Okay, all right.
You coming
Well,
in hot.
we've got a special guest on the line here, and I don't want to keep him waiting as we banter back and forth. But welcome into the podcast for the first time. Our guest of honor for tonight is David Miniatures. If you can follow him over on Instagram at David Miniatures. David, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, excited to have you here. I've been, I think before you even messaged me, I was already a fan of your Instagram account, had liked several things. And then you had
Thank you.
messaged me. You're like, hey, if you ever were open to have me on the show, I'm like, dude, I was literally about to message you that week because I was like, I mean, it just made sense.
Yeah. Well, I think I
Basically.
had seen that the podcast account had liked a couple of my posts or whatever, and I was like, I checked it out. I listened to a couple of episodes. I was like, oh, this seems cool. It seems right up my alley.
Yeah, very cool. So, and we're gonna dive into all of that stuff as we go.
Hmm.
But yeah, man, we appreciate you being here today. You guys, if you're not following him already, make sure you do that. Just get a couple plugs out of the way now. Like I said, the Instagram handle is at David Miniatures, or you can go to davidminiatures.com and check out some of his really cool items in the shop. Several are already sold out. So if you are interested in a few pieces, you can. I think the DeLorean Mine Shaft is up for sale right now, and then
Yep.
maybe Jurassic Park doors. I don't have it in front of me,
Correct. Yeah.
but I was checking earlier. The other pieces are sold out, so you're gonna have to wait. And
Yeah.
I guess
So
we
I
might have
would
to
say
find
about
out how long.
90. Yeah, I would say about 95% of my work is commissioned.
Okay,
So it's sold before it's even done. Every once in a while, I'll get an idea for something,
sure.
and I'll just pop it up on the website, and whoever wants to buy it can buy it.
That's cool.
So okay, so that's interesting. Let me kick this right off because you're saying
Yeah,
that you get the majority of your work is on commission. What's the
correct.
weirdest commission that you've gotten? Is it the RoboCop
Weird.
dick blowing off scene?
No,
I
honestly,
mean, because now it is. Now it is.
Now it is. Honestly, no, I haven't gotten any strange ones. I have gotten some from movies I've never heard of. And honestly, like this is sort of like a passion project for me. So, I have to either really be into the movie or have at least an interest in watching it. If it's totally obscure or whatever, like I'll just refuse the work some of the time just because I'm so overly whelmed, busy, that if it's not something that like screams out to me or like I can instantly see it in my head, I probably just won't do it.
So there's two scenes that I want you to consider, and you can say no,
Sure.
but I prefer you to say yes.
Okay.
It's obviously it's the RoboCop dick scene.
Correct.
Is that a yes or a no?
What's your budget?
I got 25 cents and a high five.
That's a hard no then.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so let's get a little weird. Let's
Yeah.
jump down the rabbit hole and say, can we get the final scene from Sleepaway Camp? because that would
That's
actually be really
interesting.
cool.
That would be cool.
And
That would be cool.
I don't know what I don't know what you would normally go, but I would pay for that.
Yeah.
More
The
than a
funny
quarter
thing
and a
is
handshake.
yeah, the funny thing is there's so many other, like, I mean, for those that are listening that aren't familiar with my work, most of my work is Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, and others 80s and early 90s franchises. But like, for me personally, my ultimate favorite thing is the 89 Batman, which I've done nothing for yet. And anyone that knows me is like, how have you not done that? Like, I literally have my whole forearm is Batman, like, tattooed.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
I just haven't got, because I don't make these for myself, you know. So I make them and I take pictures of them and then ship them off, and I never see them again. I only have maybe like 1 or 2 miniatures in my workshop at a time, and then they get shipped off. So, you know, I like the Batman. I really would love to do some horror stuff, some Halloween, maybe some Freddy Krueger, some stuff like that. I also try not to go into markets that are like overly saturated. A lot of people are like, how have you not done Star Wars? And I'm like, a lot of people do Star Wars. And there's also a lot of, how can you say, like, pre-made, mass-produced Star Wars stuff. You don't need to make a Star Wars diorama. You can Google it and buy one, you know? So that's one of the reasons, like, my whole thing is that I cater to, like, collectors and museums and movie studios that want to, like, have something in their office or whatever. Like, that's the kind of clients I have. So usually the stuff I make is not something that, you know, you can buy anywhere else.
That's awesome. Like, that's really cool. I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. I feel like Jeff has a question.
No, I'm just you know, kind of going over, you know, the different products I remember earlier, and, you know, just thinking of the franchises that you have done, and it's
Yeah.
interesting to see, you know, which scenes, like, you know, make sense as far as, you know, Monica and Rachel's apartment, Johnny, Short Circuit, Johnny Five, Bill and Ted, you know, Alfred Hitchcock,
Mhm.
you know, big fan of that one. And even the Spielberg, and you're talking about, you know, oversaturating the market, or, you know, not doing, you know, oversaturated markets, which I really, you know, have, you know, probably glad that you don't, because, again, you know, you could be just one of, you know, thousands of people that do, how many different types of, you know, Star Wars or Disney stuff, or, you know, other that probably have been, you know, done to death, that, you know,
Mhm.
you're thinking like, let's do something different. And, you know, a lot of respect for that one. And, you know, really enjoy and seeing some of the ones you're like, oh wow, I would have never really thought about that scene, you know, in
Yeah, and that's
Edward
like
Scissorhand or Spider-Man.
that's the cool thing about, you know, I would say probably 90 to 100% of my customers come from Instagram, and I get messages daily of like, hey, would you do this movie, would you do that movie, whatever. And it's always obscure, not obscure movies, but like movies that don't necessarily have huge franchises. And I felt like, for me, the sort of like golden goose was, I've always been a Back to the Future fan. Like a lot of people, like, not like, I wasn't always at the level that I am now. Um, but basically what happened, like, not to sort of put a downer on the conversation, but basically I used to make models as a kid, like a lot of kids, and then I stopped and thought it wasn't cool. And then back in 2013, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer.
Oh.
And because of a lot of complications and whatever, I basically was like in, you know, house arrest. And it was like affecting me mentally, right? Like, not going to work, not seeing people, not doing anything all day. Like, I pretty much finished Netflix. And at one point, I decided to just like start rewatching all the movies I watched as a kid, you know, Goonies and Back to the Future and Ghostbusters and all this stuff. And I said, you know what? I'm like, since I'm stuck home, I'm like, let me start making models again. And, you know, through my experience in my other jobs that I've done in art direction and marketing and graphic design, video editing and all that, like I acquired knowledge to make miniatures, not realizing that knowledge was there. I don't know if that makes sense through the years. So when I sort of re-entered into the craft as an adult, I was like, I'm way better at this now than I was when I was 12, you know?
Right.
And basically, because I had just watched Back to the Future, I made a diorama of a scene, one from each movie. And I showed it to a couple of friends, and they were like freaking out. They're like, "You need to like post this online or whatever." And I posted it on Flickr of all websites. I don't know
Wow.
why.
There's a
Yeah,
blast
I
from the
don't know
past right
why.
there.
I posted it on Flickr, and I also posted it on my like personal Facebook that had pictures of like me and my family, whatever. It wasn't like a business account or anything. But the pictures on Flickr got like reshared on like Reddit and Twitter and whatever, and it just kind of blew up. And I started getting emails like, I want to buy them. Can I buy them from you? Whatever. And I had made those for me. I was like, no, I'm not selling these. Like they're on my shelf. Like, you know. Eventually I did sell them just because the offers were getting a little bit too stupid to turn down. And then I was kind of like, man, like I didn't realize Back to the Future had this fan base still. And as I started, obviously, this led to like more requests to do other Back to the Future scenes, and started posting them on Instagram, and then that started blowing up. And the thing is, every time I do a new piece, I have to rewatch the movie many times.
Poor
And
guy.
the thing is, like, there's hardcore fans out there that have tried to call me out on details, like, oh, why did you put this here? And I'm like, pause the movie at this time. It's there, you know?
Oh,
Because every time
That's
I
fucking
work
awesome.
on a scene, I'll watch that scene, but I'll download, like I have the movies on like downloaded, so I watch them literally frame by frame. Like I tap next frame and I look, tap next to see, and then I'll rewatch the movie a couple of times, because especially in Back to the Future, because for example, I'll give you one that I'm working on right now. I'm working on the scene where Doc is looking, you know, where they take the camcorder and plug it up to the old TV in 1955, and
Yeah.
they're both looking at it.
Yep.
So I'm doing that scene, and I was like, man, I need to see the TV better. Like it's very dark in this scene. And then I remembered that when Marty's mom comes to Doc's garage, I think it's like later on the next day or something, and it's daytime, Marty sort of catches him rewatching the video.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a perfectly clear picture of the TV. So sometimes I'll be creating, you know, one scene, but it actually appears several times in the movie or in the series. Sometimes I can see something in part 2 that's the same set in part 3, and vice versa, you know?
Okay. I have so many follow-up questions now.
Please go ahead, because I tend to ramble when I talk about what I do.
That's great. So, take me back to 12-year-old David, and how did you get into doing miniatures in the first place?
Okay, so first of all, I have to say that my mom is super artistic, so she's an artist as well. She always like made miniatures and painted and anything remotely crafty. So I kind of sort of fell down that path through her. But it all kind of started, I would say, you know, like I would get like the model car kits, you know, like those typical model car kits that like every boy does at some point in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And I remember doing my first one and finishing it, and I was like, well, that's that, you know?
Yes.
It's similar to the way I can compare it is like Legos. You know, you follow the instructions, you build it, you look at it, and you're like, yep, that's what's on the box. And
Yep.
then like as a kid,
Now
like as an
what?
adult, you're probably like, I just paid $3,000 for a Millennium Falcon. I'm going to put it on my shelf. But as a kid, you're like, I now want to destroy this castle and make my own castle. So that's kind of how I felt when I did the model kits. So I remember I had gone to like, I don't remember what it was. It wasn't like Walmart. It was like some place where like they had model kits for like super cheap, like unpopular cars or whatever. And I bought like 5 of them. And I just basically mashed up all the different parts and would make my own stuff. I later found out through the years that this is called kit bashing, and it's basically how they made Star Wars. But in my world, I invented that when I was 12.
Dr. Frankenstein over there.
But by the
So
way,
basically, I was
yeah.
bored following the instructions and just wanted to do my own thing, and that's how.
That's really cool. Have you watched that new Disney Plus series that kind of takes
Yes.
you behind the scenes? Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool.
That's my jam. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yep. So I love those.
Yeah,
types of
honestly, I feel like I was, had I been born 20 years earlier, 20, 30
Mhm.
years earlier, that's probably where I know they still do a little bit of miniature work, but
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
not enough where I think I could get in the industry. And
you'd have killed it on the set of Beetlejuice, man.
yeah, I actually just got an email. Somebody wants something from Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
Nope, nobody say another word. You crazy
guys?
son. Oh, you crazy sons of
Oh,
bitches
man.
about killed us all.
Okay. I like that. So kind of going off of that, piggybacking off of that last part with Beetlejuice, do you have a favorite? Oops. It's like Candyman. Almost don't do that. Do you have a favorite movie from the 80s as far as like just the miniature work and like something that you look at and kind of admire as an artist?
I mean, you can't talk about miniature work and not mention Star Wars. They're kind of the the pioneers in that. But it probably comes back down to like 89 Batman for me. Quite a lot of miniature work in that one. Actually, there's even a lot of miniature work in the Dark Knight series as well, with the Tumbler. And even the miniature work in Back to the Future is pretty impressive. Like, I mean, until I started watching a lot of behind the scenes stuff, I would have never guessed that a lot of those were miniature shots. So
yeah.
So and then again, like when
give everybody a little peek behind the curtain. What's miniature work in Back to the Future and
there's
Batman?
So Batman, there's the Batwing.
Yep.
Is a miniature with Batman inside, and he steers. You see him steering and turning his head.
That blew my mind.
Yeah. Back to the Future as well. I believe all the flying cars are miniatures, and they have little Docs and Martys in them. And there's even one version with Biff from Part 2 where he steals the DeLorean. That's also miniature. And I believe the whole train scene was miniature. And keep in mind, this is movies, right? When we say miniature, the car is probably about 3 feet long instead of 7 feet long. So
what's your favorite?
They call them bigatures.
Yeah. I know this is the tough one, but like, what is your absolute like go-to if you're gonna tell somebody like, hey, this is the best it's ever been, right here?
Miniatures or movies?
Yeah, in movies.
Oof. That's
I know that's a tough one, right?
We're gonna have to edit out this giant pause that I'm about to give you.
I can interject if you need a little. I could easily say the best miniature that I've ever seen is
Don't do it.
The porno of Kyle's wedding night and the cod piece that he was wearing.
I knew it.
Talk about miniature.
Mm-hmm. This is what happens when you play sports with somebody in college.
Yeah.
They've seen you too much.
I can't think of the exact movies on the spot, but there's a lot of movies in the 80s where actually very good scene in Ghostbusters, the Marshmallow Man scene. Mm-hmm. They basically recreated, I think, like 2 or 3 city blocks of New York, and they recreated the hotel. And to me, and this sort of harkens back to my work a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
is, and this is like, I don't want any other miniature artists listening to this to be like I'm trashing on them. It's very, like, if you're good at making miniatures, it's very easy to create something that's in your mind. Like, I invented, like, whatever, I'm going to do a random storefront, right?
Okay.
Very easy to do because there's nothing to compare it to, right? It's the only thing you're comparing it to. Is it a good miniature? How realistic does it look? Like, is the scale correct? Whatever. When you're doing stuff from giant franchise films like Jurassic Park and Back to the Future and Ghostbusters and whatever, that have crazy fans that know every little detail, it's, you got to get them right. And if you don't, everybody knows. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the same way the fans take apart the movie themselves, right? The way they're always saying how the guitar that Marty plays at the Enchantment Into the Sea technically didn't come out until 2 years later, right? There's that whole thing. But then they all talk about the paradox and blah, and it goes like down a tangent, which I don't do. But the same thing happens with my work, right? Like, there's always that direct comparison. So I don't necessarily always have the artistic liberty as some other miniature artists, because they're sort of just creating an art piece, right? Like, this is a moment captured in time, random street in New York or whatever. So what impressed me about the miniature work in Ghostbusters and even like Independence Day, they created the White House when they blew it up. You know, you're creating something that everybody knows what it looks like. You know, when you do that, you have to nail it, because if you don't put the right number of windows on the White House or whatever, like, someone's gonna notice, or someone's just gonna be like, doesn't look right. Like, something. It's like when you see bad CG. You know, you're like, I don't know what it is. It just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
You can't say something like artist integrity or something.
Yeah, but it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. I did have a question in regards to, you know, your favorite miniature. What's probably one of the more obscure requests you've had, as far as, you know, maybe a cult movie following either a scene or a character that you've been requested to do?
I honestly, when it seem obscure to me, when the request comes in, it's just because I don't, like, because it's not like something like in my wheelhouse that I was a giant fan of.
Okay.
It always seems like, oh wow, like, why would someone want this? And then as I go down the rabbit hole, I realize, wow, this movie has fans all over the world and it's huge, and whatever. A couple of examples is, I did Cetrial's from The Sopranos. And again, Sopranos was an excellent show. I loved it when it was on. Didn't realize the fan base that it still had today, where I get a Sopranos request like once a month. So, again, is it obscure? No, it was a giant show on HBO. It just felt obscure to me because, again, you know, when I think of TV shows with giant followings, I think Seinfeld, I think Friends, I think these big shows, you know. The Alfred Hitchcock Rear Window was also a little bit obscure to me. Like, it's a fairly old movie. I had personally never seen it. That was actually a personal request. It was a gift for this gentleman's 40th birthday. Sorry, for his wife's birthday. And he's like, it's her favorite movie, whatever. And he's like, I told him, I said, listen, in all honesty, like, I'm not going to say yes. I'm not going to give you a quote or whatever. I'm like, let me watch the movie and I'll get back to you. So I watched the movie and I went back to him and I said, listen, I can do the courtyard or whatever. I think that's pretty much where the movie takes place. So, I can't really say I've gotten obscure requests. If I have, I probably turn them down. Just because it's like, I don't know enough of it, or there's like a lack of interest. Like for me, like I have to enjoy doing this because I spend hundreds and hundreds of hours working on this.
Right.
So to work on something that doesn't interest you is like torture.
Yeah, funny enough, speaking of obscure, on your website, the Three's Company, our
Yeah.
improv studio has a Joyce DeWitt room that we call, and again, of all the shows and of all the characters, there I see that. So it's kind of funny that, you mentioned like someone out there is a fan and it just wanted,
Yeah. And
that
again,
background.
like to some people that's obscure, right? Like
Right.
Three's Company, like it's so old, so random. But like if you go down the rabbit hole, huge fan base till this day. And actually I'm working on one right now for Family Ties.
Do tell. I'm very curious with the
Yeah.
TV family.
So it's very similar to the Three's Company. So it's going to be the living room and the kitchen, like the sets, the way they appeared at the studio.
Yeah.
And that's someone that saw my Three's Company, and they're like a huge Family Ties fan, huge Michael J. Fox fan. So they probably came to my account through the Back to the Future
Sure.
realm, and that's it. Again, Baywatch was another one that I did, and again, like I watched it when it was on in the '90s, but huge fan base.
Mm-hmm.
So
Much like,
it's.
I mean, do you
I
have
would say, like, what's
Frasier in your
obscure
future?
for me? Sorry.
Do you have Frasier in your future? Can we just be honest?
No one's requested it. No, actually, no.
Damn it.
Someone did request it. They did request it.
Yes.
They
Love
did not
it.
approve the budget.
Yeah. Again, a quarter and a handshake, too much.
I was
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
also, either that or Cheers, again, thinking of,
Cheers would be awesome.
yeah. Cheers, I think,
So-
would just take you with the amount of glasses, the particular details that you mentioned. And,
Yeah.
I could see someone like, oh, an episode, season 3, episode 4, there's only 15 glasses here, but you have 14.
Right.
Yeah. Usually,
Coach
what
was
I
dead by now.
do what I do for TV shows is, I mean, usually, again, like all my stuff is commissioned, so I'll work directly with the client and be like, hey, look, perfect example, and this might seem ridiculous to some of you, but when I was doing the Three's Company, it was actually for a man that owns a Three's Company museum. I believe he's in Toronto.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, look, the orange curtains in the background, they changed. I think it was like season 3 or something. I don't remember. So they went from solid orange to like a white with like orange pattern on it or whatever. So in that case, like I went to him and I'm like, which ones do you want? Do you want like the OGs or do you want like the post season 3? So he's like, I want the OG curtains. I'm like, okay, fine. So most of the time I'll just deal with the client and what they want. Movies are easier to do. I mean, nothing's easy, but movies are easier to do than TV shows, just because TV shows tend to, especially the ones with large following, tend to run for many years, and there's always like discrepancies and changes, right? So I would say Friends is probably one of the ones that's like the most consistent. But again, like the chairs change from season to season and things like that. So usually I'll work with whoever requested it to make it how they want.
So I've got a question, because by now our listeners are like 30 minutes into this and they're going, I have to have something made by him. So I think it's important like to maybe answer some questions for them right now on what's realistic and how do they so I've got several questions written down for you here. So first is, how would somebody go about contacting? What's the best way?
Best way is either the contact form on my website or directly through Instagram is fine as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is a realistic ask and what is not?
Nothing is impossible.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. I've done what I call now my fan frames. So I started doing these because there's people that want my work that don't necessarily have thousands of dollars and 6 months to wait for this thing. They want it as a gift, or they want, so I do these that I can do fairly quickly. They're like under $1,000, they're like a couple of $100. And I get those out. I just did one of the Michael Myers house from Halloween, 1978, with a very tiny Michael Myers, all fit into a frame. So, in terms of like budget, there's no limit. And in terms of what I can do, there's no limit. It's just a question of how much are you willing to pay? How long are you willing to wait?
Right.
And, what is it that you want, right?
Okay.
An example of the other spectrum. I have a client that I've been working on his project for a while now, and he wants all of Hill Valley, well, the courthouse
So
square
cool.
with all the stores and everything.
Yeah.
Not only does he want all of Hill Valley, he wants it in 1955. When I finish that one, he wants 2015. And when I finish that one, he's still undecided, but he has a couple of years by the time I get there.
Sure.
It's going to either be Hill Valley 1885 or Hill Valley 1985, or maybe both.
Hopefully both.
So, to give you an idea, these are projects that are in the thousands of dollars and take like one of those is probably going to take me a year to a year and a half.
Yeah.
To complete.
That's
mostly because
so cool.
I can't just work on that.
Yeah.
Right, because then I would have nothing to post on Instagram. I would have basically I would just live in a cave and work on this for 6 months.
Right.
So I kind of, I'll do one building and then work on another project, and I'll do another building, So
at any one time, how many different projects do you have going on?
I would say, like, on my to-do list, or how many am I physically working on?
Like, no, actually, how many do you like try and physically work on at one time?
I would say not more than 3.
Okay.
And I used to do one at a time, which, thinking back now, I don't even know why or how I did that. But I basically, like, there's a lot of downtime when I work on these. Yeah. So either it's paint drying time, glue drying time. I get to a point where I'm like, oh, I need this special thing. I need a special LED. I need a special motor to make this work. I need a special something that I have to order from Amazon or China or whatever. Then there's the time where I'm sort of stuck waiting for this item to arrive. And before I would just kind of wait, So now I just like, okay, that project goes on the side. Let me start on this one. And then there's research time too, which is a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah.
And the more unfamiliar I am with something, the more research time there is.
Okay. So I have 2 questions as far as like how long it takes. So you mentioned these are a little bit quicker with the frames. How long does it take you to build out a frame, like in particular, like the Back to the Future 1 frame that you have that's sold?
So the Back to the
right
Future
now,
frame, I did about all 3 in about a week and a half to 2 weeks.
Okay. That's not bad. Yeah. Now, what about something
could you actually explain? Oh. Sorry. Yeah, could you just explain what you mean by a frame?
Sorry?
Yeah, could you explain what you mean by a frame?
So I don't know if you're on my website right now.
I am.
Yeah, so if you click on shop, there's the ones that say fan frames on them. So that's what Kyle's referring to.
Yep.
Okay.
So these are just sort of frames, like they are 3D, but they're just, small frames. They're not full dioramas.
Are you able to add like lighting to those too?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what size are those?
Those are 5x7.
5x7s.
Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
The inside is 5x7. Yeah.
What about the Michael Myers house? Because I saw that was like one of your more recent posts on Instagram. You had the cool Halloween music. We're coming up on the new movie, which I also want to ask you about. Like, what does something like that take?
So that one, again, like I was extremely familiar with the movie. So research time was minimal. I basically, went into my personal library and opened up the movie, got a good shot, from the Blu-ray of the house, took a screenshot, and just got to work. I mean, it is a house, so it's at its core, it's pretty basic build.
Sure.
It was just about the details and the weathering and making it look just shitty enough.
Is that the hardest part? It sometimes is just getting like the weathering and the coloring part of it. Is that where you spend the most of your time?
The hardest part is achieving realism.
Yeah.
And for me, and I mean, another miniature artist might tell you something different, but for me, I started achieving realism when I stopped using found objects. And I stopped because I was looking at other people's work, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then within 5 seconds, I'm like, oh, that's a toothbrush cap that he used for the flower pot. And that, and for me, like, illusion ruined,
Yeah.
You'll see in a lot of my work, I don't use people. Very, very rarely will I, unless they're either figures that already exist that I can just detail and use. But if it's a figure, for example, like, sorry about the dog.
Oh, you're good.
If it's a figure like Jason, right? His face is covered, a lot of clothes, whatever. I can make that look real, right? Because it's not a real person. It's not, like RoboCop is another example. Like, that one worked out great because he's a robot, like. So I find a lot of times, like, if I would put little people, like, for Baywatch, if I would have put little figures at that scale, it just makes the whole thing look like a toy. And for me, the end goal is always, if you would look at it without my hand in the picture, you wouldn't be sure.
Okay.
That's the goal.
That's actually exactly what my son said today, because I was telling him that I was going to talk to you, and I was kind of explaining what you did, and I showed him your Instagram, and he was like, I thought this was actually the movie. And I was like, well, this is how you know it's not the movie. There's his hand right here, and it was it's the driveway outside of the McFly house.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, okay. And he was like, can you ask? He's 9 years old, by the way. He's
Yeah.
like, can you ask
My son's
him,
11.
Can he make Spider-Man miniatures? And I was like, I'm pretty sure he can, bud. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm honestly surprised my son doesn't ask me for a lot of stuff. He sees how long it takes and all that stuff. So he's just like, I'll just let you do it for other people, and like, I'll look at it before you ship it out.
Well, since we're a movie podcast, let's nerd out a little bit about the Halloween franchise. Obviously, we have the last movie about ready to come out into theaters. What have you thought about this latest iteration of the Halloween franchise, and kind of where they've taken this new trilogy?
I think what I'm about to say kind of goes for any remake or whatever that's in any franchise.
Sure.
A lot of like the hardcore fans are always like, the original is the best and blah blah blah. And for me, it's I enjoy remakes, I enjoy reboots, except for that one Ghostbusters that we're not going to talk about.
I talk about that one. I love the new one.
But yeah, the new one was the shit. But I've loved every iteration of Michael, and I've loved every single one of the movies. For me, like, when it comes to 80s horror, he's my, like, Halloween's my go-to.
Yep.
My least favorite would probably be Pinhead.
Ooh, JD's not gonna like that.
Jason is a hard second, and Freddy's like a third. But that's like me personally, and it's more on the characters themselves, not necessarily the movies, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
Why do you think that I like Hellraiser all of a sudden, Kyle?
I thought you loved Hellraiser.
No, I think it's a shit movie.
Oh. Well, crap. All right. Well, I guess
Like,
I'm
what the
wrong.
fuck?
You think
Yeah,
you
you
know
know,
somebody after 5 years on a show and you don't. Wow. Interesting. Um, our prediction time. What do you think happens? It's called Halloween Ends. Is it just that simple? Are they just telling us right away that this is what's happening, or do you think Michael lives, Laurie goes?
I
Like, what
mean,
are you thinking?
I think I would be putting my foot in my mouth if I said like, "Yep, this is it. Michael dies. Close the book. Have a good night." Um, I think it's the end of that movie.
Okay.
That's my vote. It's the end of like that version of Michael.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna have a much longer podcast about this, so I'll table some of my thoughts, but
Yeah,
I think they both go out in a blaze of glory, Laurie and
yeah,
Michael. I think that's how we end this chapter.
All right, Rob
Yeah.
Zombie, calm down.
And the Akkad family will never let this be the last chapter. It'll just be a couple year break, and we'll have a brand new one coming.
exactly.
So.
I mean, the big controversial topic is, the whole Back to the Future. Will they make another one? Whatever. And I know Zemeckis and all that. Those guys said like it's not going to happen. Whatever.
Okay.
And I get it. I respect that. My thing is, and I feel like whenever like I go on the fan pages and fan groups and whatever, like everyone loses their shit when this topic comes up. And at the end of the day, it's like it's a movie. Let's chill.
Right.
But what I would like to see as a fan is not even I don't know what you would call it, a reboot or whatever, but like leave the movies as is, but kind of Ghostbusters Afterlife it.
Okay.
What if
Yeah.
some kid, his parents buy an old house or whatever, and there's a DeLorean in the garage,
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I love that idea already.
and
I
then
just love
like
it.
run with that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
I mean, that's such an easy way back into the franchise, right?
It's
Like
and the thing is like,
Marty's got to have kids. They find the
but it doesn't
DeLorean.
even. But that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like, it doesn't even have to harken back to Marty or Doc.
Right.
Like, just make it about the DeLorean and time travel. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be its own. Like, you could milk that to the end of time. It could
But
be a TV show. It could be. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be. Doesn't even have to be called Back to the Future. It could be called Back to the Past, or you know what I'm saying? Like it's just the way. I mean, obviously, Ghostbusters tied it up with having them all show up and all that stuff at the end. But if you take the beginning of it and switch the Ecto one for a DeLorean, like there's your spinoff. There's your, and I think like
Yeah.
everyone would just be happy to see the DeLorean back on the screen. No one would get pissed off because Marty and Doc are not, you know what I mean? Like they could be mentioned, they could be, maybe he finds a hoverboard in the car or whatever. But
yes, exactly. And I agree 100% with what you're saying, because it could be almost like a quantum leap level of a series or a movie where it's like, this is a DeLorean, this is a different time travel, and there's these different spaces of pockets of universes where people have been at certain times, and it's just an Easter egg.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's so cool, man.
And
Yeah.
to me, that's no different than was it Seth MacFarlane that like put Doc in the DeLorean like in that shitty movie he made
Yeah.
about the West?
Right.
Like apparently he
Yeah.
opens like the barn door and Doc is there and he covers up the DeLorean. Like people lost their shit.
Yep.
And that was just in the trailer.
Yeah,
I-
and that's all I saw. I didn't even watch the movie. I'm like, this is amazing.
My favorite part of Ready Player One is the fact that he drives around in a DeLorean.
Yeah.
So,
And again, like, why is that okay, but a kind of reboot or whatever isn't?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah,
but
one
that's just
thing I do notice, David, about all your stuff, it's really about just the set piece itself, and I think that's what people enjoy, probably the most about your work. At least I do. Looking over it, it's just looking at the set pieces and not even the characters, even though you don't have any, or the cars or something of that nature. It's just you look at that picture, you look at it and just it brings you back to the time when you watched that movie for the first time or you watched that TV show for the first time. That's really what I enjoy probably most of looking at your work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the goal, like it's, I think every single person that emails me and requests something or whatever, they all pretty much say exactly what you just said. They're like, your work brings me back to my favorite movie or my favorite moment in the movie or whatever. And the fact that I can just look at that on my desk in 3 dimensions instead of having to pop in the movie and forward to that scene, it's a different experience.
I love that. What do you think is the most rabid fan base when it comes to collectibles? Because I think, yeah, I've been to conventions. Ghostbusters is always really well represented at festivals. So is Star Wars.
Yeah.
Back to the Future. I just feel like Back to the
Star
Future and
Trek?
Ghostbusters, yeah, and Star Trek.
You mean in
Like
general or from the work I've done?
in
Both.
general.
I want to hear both. Screw you, Kyle. I
Yeah,
want to hear
but give us
both.
both. Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
I
because
want to hear why it's
the thing is, like,
trauma.
I think Star Wars has probably
Yeah.
the largest global fan base, I would say.
Global. How about rabid though?
What do you mean by that?
So like
crazies?
yeah, like I
No,
think
like
of,
I think when he
exactly.
says when people complain about the, hey, you're
The
missing a
accuracies and all
window,
that?
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've found that in all fan bases, but it's always like a couple of dudes. I've had that with Back to the Future. I've had that with Ghostbusters, whatever. But in general, most people are like, "Yo, that's sick," because they're just so happy to see something from the franchise that they love so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I did a Ghostbusters one that it's for me it's different because like the backdrop has nothing really to do with the movie. I just customized an Ecto one, put it in front of my own version of a 1980s Times Square, and it
I
has
see
like
now.
working screens and all that, and that like no one's like, oh, that backdrop was never in the movie. Like people just saw it, they saw the working screens, they saw the Ecto one lighting up, and they lost their mind. And that Ecto one is an off-the-shelf Ecto one, 1/24 scale, but it does not light up by stock. I had to like take it apart and drill out the headlights and all that and make it light up. One change I've made in my go ahead.
Well, we'll go ahead and finish that now. I'll ask a follow-up question because I'm going back to the future with my next question. So
no, I was just gonna say because that piece reminded me that like lately I've changed one thing about my work, and I don't work in the super small scales as much anymore, just because it's basically the larger scale you work in, the easier it is to add more details and make it more realistic. So like the Friends one and the Jurassic Park one are like my 2 tiniest. I probably wouldn't do those scales again, just because, again, when you have it physically in front of you, it's so much nicer. But when you photograph something that's that small, like a little accidental drop of glue looks like a puddle from a tsunami, like, so it doesn't photograph well. It doesn't look well on social. It's much harder to build, and people assume like if something's smaller, it should be cheaper.
right.
But actually smaller is way harder to build than something a little bit larger.
That's awesome. Yeah, with my going back to my Back to the Future question. So we were lucky enough to have one of the producers come on from the Discovery show that was called Expedition Back to the Future. And,
I love that.
And I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and I already knew about these guys ahead of time, but I'm curious if you've been in contact with them for any work yet. But the Shea family from Massachusetts are
no, I know who they are.
Premier Back to the Future collectors.
Yeah, I know who they are. I believe I have them on Instagram.
Okay.
I've never spoken to them or anything, but and I might be wrong about this, and I hope I am because they seem like really cool people to work with.
Mhm.
There's some collectors that, how can I say this? There's some collectors that like they want either like, you know, obviously they want the screen used gadget,
Right.
but there's the ones that like they want that mass produced thing that they know they only made 10,000 of them or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them don't necessarily see the value in something custom made, one of a kind. I know that seems weird to say,
Yeah.
but it's
I understand.
do you know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
Yep.
and I get it, you know, like some people collect like McDonald's toys and it's like, oh, they stopped making this one in 87 and it's like, okay, cool. But it's like if I make a diorama of a McDonald's, they could give a shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So there's different types of collectors. And for me, like all the ones that I deal with, I have some that are regulars. I have some clients that like I'll finish an order and they're like, now I want this. And it's they see the value in it, and you know, I certify all my work. It comes with certificate of authenticity, so if ever they want to resell it or whatever, you know. But it's a different thing, you know. Like for what you're getting from me is more of an art piece. It's like if you were buying a painting of Marty McFly, you know. It's not necessarily that one time McDonald's did a collab with Back to the Future and there's this rare little car. Like it's not the same thing.
Cool. Well, I want
I
to
don't know
go
if that
around.
answers your
I want
question.
to go. It does. I want to go around the horn, JD, Jeff, and I'll myself included. I want each of us to pick like what's one thing after talking with David for a while now. Like, what's one thing that you would want to get made if you could pick one piece? And I'll start just because I'm throwing this at you guys with no preparation at all. But I am super tempted to have David to recreate the Joker scene in the street, the parade, where he pulls out that Smith and Wesson 21-inch little gun and points it and shoots down the Batwing. That would be amazing.
That's really cool. That's a good one.
Yeah, Jeff, what about you, man?
Uh, well, let's see here. Let me think about this.
I can go if you need a moment, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead. That's all right. I'm gonna edit
Okay.
myself out anywhere now, anyways.
So one of my all time, and I love all the work that you've done, David. Like in just going through your website and going through your Instagram. Everybody, if you've got any wants, interests, or queries, hit them up. Just stop listening to the podcast and just go over to David Miniatures and just give them your business. But I know you don't. You said that you don't necessarily like to have figures necessarily, correct?
Yep.
But if we can get the Droogs walking down the waterway in a Clockwork Orange,
That could be cool.
I agree. That I would pay for that. That I'd pay a few thousand
He
for.
wasn't as excited about Batman, but that's all right, JD.
No, well, no. Obviously, Kyle, you win and I lose, but that's because you're ugly and I'm not. So we have to give you a bone.
Okay. Jeff.
All right.
Coming
So,
back to you, Jeff.
yeah, after thinking about it, you know, I think with the okay, let me start over.
was
I
like,
think
"Do
I
you
would
need another
probably
moment?"
want I would probably commission for the ship and the Goonies.
Oh
The
yeah.
pirate ship.
I've actually been asked for
Underrated.
that probably about 4 times.
Okay. And your answer
The
has
only
been
reason
no, it sounds like.
No, my answer's always been yes. It's just
Nice.
the price. People just have a problem with the price, and the thing is, like, I don't, my price includes materials and obviously my time and all that.
Right.
But for me, it's, I'll give you an example, like that huge order I told you about, like, doing all of Hill Valley.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many people have asked me for that. The problem is there was only one guy that was willing to pay for it. And it's not because oh, I want this, or I think it's worth this. It's just like, this is how much time it's going to take. And like, can I do it for $1,000? Probably, but it's going to look like shit,
Right.
and because one of my things is I only do things once. So once I make something, I will never make it again. I can make variations of it or a different angle or whatever, but I usually don't make the same thing twice. So I knew, like, when I get the request to do Hill Valley, that I got to do it properly.
Dude, I fucking
So
love that.
Yeah.
I have to ask a logistics question. How do
Yeah.
you how do you ship the entire
That's a good
set of
question.
Hill Valley?
this is what I call a future David problem.
Okay.
No, actually, I have thought of it, and it is something I had to think of pre-build. What I'm actually going to do is each of the buildings in Hill Valley is going to be magnetized. So the base is going to basically ship as like just one flat sheet, maybe in two sections. I'll see if I can, put a break somewhere in there where it's not too visible, maybe in the grass or something like that. And then each one is going to have, like building 5, building 6, building 7, and it's going to be labeled. And
I was going to say,
do
you provide him like a Lego book of a page by page?
Sort of, yeah. Like he's going to be able to sort of assemble it himself. And the client himself, like he's pretty savvy and stuff. So he's like, if I feel the magnets aren't enough, he's like, I'll just put a little screw underneath or whatever, So, but yeah, it's massive.
It'd be a real issue for me. I am not handy. You'd be
actually,
on FaceTime with me for hours. I'd be like, dude, I don't. What do you mean screw something in? I'm like, right or left?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
And actually, I right when I started the project, I called him back and I said, listen, I think we should change the scale. And he's like, why? And I'm like, I've seen, because originally the scale was going to be 187th, which is like model trains.
Okay.
And I've seen a ton of model train people try and meet Hill Valley. To no offense to them, like it looks like a model train set. But it just kind of made me aware of like the limitations of that scale. And it's very small. It's the same scale as my friend's set. If you guys want to take a look, but it's very, very small.
Yeah.
And I told him like,
so
I
more importantly,
are
you going to have pictures of this final Hill Valley done at that scale, or is it private for you and the collector?
Oh no, everything I do is published. I've actually already published pictures of the first building I did, which is the Essex movie theater. It's one of the more obscure buildings that you don't see that much. Yeah. It's probably most popular for Back to the Future Part 2, which is the theater where the fake Jaws comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm doing the 1955 version, which is not seen as much. I had to actually watch the skateboard chase in like slow motion, because that's the only time you see it like in the background.
Yeah, I was going to ask what movie is playing at the Essex.
It is. I will tell you right now. Hold on.
Better be Jaws 19.
No, it's not 17.
1955.
Jaws -17.
Oh, is it a movie with Ronald Reagan in it?
Yeah, it's Ronald Reagan and Cattle Queen of Montana. That's the one.
Oh, nice.
Well played.
Very cool. Well, let's.
Yeah, I have a lot of
Yeah.
cool projects coming up.
That's awesome. Let's do this. We always end the episodes with interview guests by asking 5 questions. I got 5 questions ready to roll for you. One of them I think is going to be incredibly hard, and that's the one we'll end on. Some of them are just kind of fun, goofy ones. But what was your first job as a kid?
Oh, as a kid?
Or a teen?
Bussing tables. Bussing tables at my parents' restaurant.
There we go. Okay, what kind of food?
Italian.
There we go. Nice. My family owns a pizza restaurant. I like it.
Oh, nice.
Okay. First car you ever purchased, or not purchased, but your first car. Maybe you were given a car.
My first car was my mom's hand-me-down, which was a 1987 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra,
Of
two-tone
course.
navy blue and baby blue.
There we go. There we go.
Classic.
How long did you have that for?
At least 2 years.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
more importantly, did you make a model of it?
I did not.
That should be your
But
own
there's still
personal
time.
collection, the Oldsmobile Cutlass miniature
Yeah.
in the driveway or something. That's cool. Okay. Now it's going to get a little harder.
Mhm.
On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, how do you rate Doc Brown's model work in the movies?
5 being the best,
Mm-hmm.
I would say 3. Sorry, Doc.
Okay. Well, he always apologizes. He was
Yeah.
he's a little rushed.
Not accurate, not to scale.
Yeah, not the
So
scale.
that's why I gave him a 3 because he admitted it. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. Do you have a favorite out of the 3 for his scales? For his models, I should say.
I kind of like the all-white one,
Mm-hmm.
the 1955 one. I've actually been wanting to redo that one in miniature.
Yep.
I'm just trying to get some information on the type of ping pong table that it was on,
There you go.
because the legs aren't seen in the movie, so I'm trying to figure out what ping pong table that was.
Yeah, gotta get a hold
That's
of-
how much I
gotta get a
geek
hold of
out on
Bob
these
Gale.
things.
Bob Gale.
Yeah, I've spoken to Bob Gale before.
Nice. I bet he's a fan.
He
That's
is.
cool.
Yeah.
Favorite actor to play Batman?
Oh man,
Told you they're getting hard.
like from the Batmans, which one's my favorite, or like
Mhm.
new actor I wish
your
would play
your
Batman?
favorite version of Batman.
Well,
Michael Keaton.
just to clarify, you can answer as Batman and Bruce Wayne. You can have an answer
Sure.
for each, because I think that there's a distinct difference in
For
the
sure.
actor's portrayal as Batman and as Bruce Wayne. So feel free to throw both out there.
I like it.
Honestly, like I've been pretty happy with the Batman selection, other than Ben Affleck. Wasn't a fan.
Agreed.
Wasn't a fan.
Wow.
Christian
Really?
Bale was
lower than George Clooney?
Clooney wasn't bad.
You know what? The
movie
thing
was
is,
bad.
I feel like Clooney and Val Kilmer get a bad rap because
Mhm.
A, they followed Keaton, and
Yep.
B, the movies were kind of stupid.
They're cartoonish.
Yeah, they're like, the nipples, and like it's just stupid.
Okay.
So I feel like if Clooney would have done the franchise from the beginning, he would have been awesome. Val Kilmer, I never saw him as a he's a good like he looks good in the cowl, but I don't like him as Bruce Wayne. Like he's too blonde, and I don't know. He always gives me that surfer dude vibe, which is not Bruce.
Iceman.
Iceman.
Yeah. Iceman. Yeah. So, yeah, I would say Keaton for sure.
Keaton
Nice.
for both?
For both, yeah.
Okay. That's fair. All right. This one's going to be hard for you, I think. Or you might already have an answer. If you could go in your own DeLorean and go back in time as yourself, as an adult, and work on any 80s movie and be part of the crew designing these models, which movie are you picking?
Oh. That is hard.
Good. You had not thought about it. I like that.
Like no, so this is like it's like I know if the movie's already successful or not and all that, right? Because I'm in a time machine, correct?
Yep.
You got it.
Yep. You got it.
Yep.
I feel like if I said Back to the Future, it would be some weird paradox because I'm going in a DeLorean.
Right.
And there's actually not that much miniature work in Back to the Future. I would probably choose Ghostbusters.
I love it. You just want to be best friends now, or a couple more times for us to be on? Cool.
Definitely Ghostbusters for sure.
Yeah. All right. I love it, man. That's all I got. Unless Jeff, JD, anything else you guys wanted to ask Dave before we let him go?
No, I'm all set.
I just have one quick question that
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up earlier, and I didn't get a chance to because I didn't want to interrupt you because you were pontificating like a champ.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to your research process, like what does that look like? Are you a note taker? Do you throw stuff in your computer? Do you doodle?
I'm not a note taker. Um, it's I go direct to visuals. So it
Awesome.
really depends on, obviously if it's a movie, I start with watching it. Then I'll watch it like on my computer and like sort of pause, grab screen grabs. I usually create a folder with anywhere between 100 and 500 screen grabs sometimes, depending on the scene.
Wow.
Um, then I just try and break it down to how I'm going to make it, what's going to be made out of what material. And I kind of create, um, I guess you can call them blueprints, like to scale, sort of like the front and top, just so I have something to like print out and look at and be like, okay, this is the size it's going to be. A lot of times, for example, if it's Back to the Future and it includes a DeLorean, then it's like which DeLorean, like what scale DeLorean am I purchasing? So is it the 143rd? Is it like a 124? Um, and I also have to think like I don't just take the DeLorean out of the packaging and glue it onto my thing. I always take them apart. I add the wiring. Sometimes I add the lights. Um, so I process all that information and then sort of I usually pick what's the hardest thing going to be to build this, and I work off of that.
Mm.
So again, another example, when I did the DeLorean backing out of Doc's van, I knew I wanted the DeLorean to be the 143rd scale. I don't use sort of like Hot Wheel size cars, the 164s, mostly because they are not true to scale. They are scaled to fit in Hot Wheels packaging. Perfect example is if you buy Doc's van and you buy the DeLorean from Hot Wheels, the DeLorean is almost the same length as the van, which makes no sense. So when I was doing the DeLorean scene coming out of the car, sorry, out of the van, I had to find this band. I'm like, no one makes this band in 143rd scale. And I ended up finding some like 1980s like UPS piggy bank or something. Or no, sorry, it was a Brinks. It was like a bank giveaway piggy bank thing, like made out of cast iron. Like I found it on eBay and it was the right size. And like when I posted that, like people were emailing me left, right, and center. Where did you get the truck? Where did you get the truck? And I'm like, I don't think they make it anymore. Like, so yeah, so it's a lot of there's a lot more prep than people think. It's not just I don't just go in my workshop and start cutting wood and gluing stuff together.
I
Unfortunately,
legit at some point think I sold something like that on eBay because my uncle used to own a baseball card shop and he had all these like model piggy bank toy cards in there, and I sold some of these on eBay.
it'd be funny if that was you.
That would be crazy. I'd have to see it, but like I legit I sent them like all over the place.
Yeah.
It's been years though, so that's really cool, and we really appreciate you coming on the show. Go ahead and plug one more time your website, Instagram. Where can people find you and reach out to you if they're interested in getting some work commissioned?
Yeah, it's David Miniatures on Instagram and davidminiatures.com on my website. And there's some really interesting stuff coming out soon. So if people want to follow me and keep up with that. So I'm doing a collab with this band called Bull Airs. And they basically do what I do, but with shoes. They basically take like Nike high tops and customize them to match Back to the Future, Freddy Krueger, and Ninja Turtles. It's absolutely insane what they do. And they are bull_airs on Instagram. If you guys want to check them out, it's super cool. I'm looking at like what they did now, like Batman and Robin like shoes. It's absolutely insane. So we're going to be doing basically a collab. We're going to be selling a one of a kind Ninja Turtles diorama with a pair of sneakers that match. And this is the '90s Ninja Turtles, not the new ones, obviously. And I'm also working on something that I cannot talk about, but it is for a very popular streaming service. That's all I can say.
Oh, I like it.
That's what we call
Yeah.
a tease.
Hey, we've
Yeah.
had several of our guests that we've interviewed on here have gone on to appear on some we won't name them, but they've appeared on some rather large shows after coming on here. So
Yeah.
maybe you might be next. So
We'll see.
put it out there. Very cool, man. We appreciate you coming on. Would love
Thanks
to
for
have you
having me.
back at some point. Maybe
Yeah, for sure.
maybe around like a special movie. Maybe around the next Ghostbusters movie. Maybe we get you back on and we just talk about the new movie and let you just talk. We can theorize what the sequel is going to be like, or have you on afterwards to get your feedback on it.
Sounds good.
That'd be cool. So awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, David. As always,
Thanks, guys.
thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Back in Time podcast. You can subscribe right here on YouTube if you're watching, or if you're on podcast platforms, just hit that subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode. And follow us on social media at Back in Time Pod. I'm Kyle. He's JD. He's Jeff. And that's David. Thanks for listening. Have a good night. See ya.